That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The British Constitution provides that taxation and representation shall go together. Therefore, women taxpayers are entitled to vote.
I have a dream today. Let freedom ring, and if America is to be a great nation, this must become true.
Hey there. Welcome back to Only Human, or if you're here for the first time, welcome. This is where we explore the human side of complex, high-stakes environments, like everyday life. I'm Tony, and I'm here to guide you through our fascinating world of human performance. Performance through process and innovation, courage and fear, darkness and light, through thick and thin. Today, I want to venture into the concept of personal discipline and decision-making. Now, that sounds incredibly boring, doesn't it? But I promise you, it won't be. We're going to dive into how the delicate balance between our capabilities, our qualifications, and maybe most importantly, our self-awareness impact the decisions we make in our lives around this idea of compliance to rules and promises. You know, we hear a lot about compliance, and it sounds like a simple thing to grasp, but like all things human, it can get seriously slippery on occasion. So we're going to sort all that out. Let's start, like we always do, with our Blue Threat Proverb of the Week. And today it maps pretty good to what we're talking about. Blue Threat Proverb number 33, non-compliance is progressive and addictive. This idea of breaking a rule and then breaking a more significant rule, and again, when I say rules, these may be regulations, they may be policies and procedures, or they may just be promises we make to our friends, our family, our coworkers, our loved ones. And if the idea that when we get away with it once, we are more likely to do it again and more likely to do it more progressively and at deeper risk should scare us. And it certainly does me. There's a quote that comes from an airline captain that I once interviewed who had been fired for progressive deviations, finally drug an engine pod after trying to land out of an unstabilized approach. And in the interview with him, when he'd already been let go from his job, he told me this. He said, you know, the first violation was out of necessity. The next one was out of convenience. And then it became a habit that I just couldn't or wouldn't break. Now that's an interesting perspective. And I think, you know, I'm sure he wished he'd have learned it sooner, but maybe there's some things we can learn from this airline captain. A habit I couldn't break. It almost sounds like some sort of drug addiction. So being me and how I think, I decided to look into this angle. And guess what? It is. It absolutely is biochemical in nature. At least for many of us, it seems like an issue of willpower, but it's far more than that. So in just a moment, we're going to look into the physiology of temptation. Ooh, physiology of temptation. That sounds so deliciously deviant and dangerous. And it kind of is. And we're going to jump right into that in 60 seconds after a short word from our sponsor.
Have you ever finished the latest bestseller on habits or personal performance and asked, yeah, okay, but how? All the improvements you visualize while reading the books require one thing to achieve in your own life: deliberate practice, a new way of focusing attention inside the routine to drive consistent improvement with every experience. Focused on getting the biggest impact from your career development opportunities, the Deliberate Practice of Professionalism course from Convergent Performance teaches you the steps and requirements to achieve improvement and mastery of your targets. Discover how deliberate practice can springboard your improvement efforts, no matter what they might be or your current skill level. Join us on our website at convergentperformance.com and click the link for e-learning to sign up for this exciting program today.
Okay, let's explore this fascinating aspect that intersects with professional discipline and personal decisions. The temptation to deviate. We'll start with from known rules at work, but keep in mind this could even be promises at home. And understanding the physiology of temptation can shed light on why we sometimes, despite our better judgment, break the rules. So here we go. When faced with a temptation, our brains enter this complex dance of decision making. And it starts in what's called the limbic system. It's the emotional center of the brain, and it's where desires are born. The limbic system, where desires are born. So there's a role in here for something called neurotransmitters. And you've probably heard about a lot of these, but we'll talk about a few of them today. Dopamine. Dopamine is often labeled as the feel-good transmitter. And it plays a critical role because it gets released in anticipation of a reward. Right? So dopamine looks forward and says, man, I'm going to feel really good, really better when I do this, when I break this rule, when I break this promise. Except that you're already feeling better, right? It entices you to create a sense of excitement, pleasure. Imagine this little life scenario. You're in a fitness regime, right? You're dedicated to getting your workouts in and eating better, and you just have this random thought that says, for just one night, I want to sit back and watch some sci-fi TV and eat an entire pizza. Instantly, my brain, this person's brain, releases dopamine at the thought of satisfying this desire for comfort. And it urges me, it lures me, it entices me toward the easier choice, right? So, with that in play, with a powerful drug like dopamine leading us into temptation, it seems like we're chemically doomed to fail. But the fight's not over yet. Okay? So the next thing I want to talk about is the conflict with cortisol. Right? Simultaneously with this dopamine telling you, yeah, go ahead, if it feels good, do it. If we have a purpose, a purpose and a known value or a policy or known procedure that we care about and we know is of value to us, there is a corresponding spike in cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone. And we always hear about, we got to reduce stress, reduce stress. Not this time, right? This is our friend. Cortisol is our friend when temptations are looming large, because remember, we are being enticed biochemically by dopamine to violate. So as the brain recognizes the conflict between immediate gratification and long-term goals, in this case, fitness, this internal battle is waged. And this is what we often experience as the tug-of-war of temptation. And while we talk about the willpower to stay inside the lines, when you understand that this is a biochemical process that's going on in our brains, there's some things that we can do to give cortisol maybe a fighting chance. So let's look at a couple of real-world examples. In the professional world, it could look like a seasoned employee bending a safety rule or financial rule. Back to our airline captain. You know what? I've done this 1,000 times. I know better than the procedure. I've landed on unstabilized approaches. I've salvaged much worse than this. This time's going to be like every other time. That's the dopamine working in his brain. Or let's consider. Here's one. I kind of like to be an environmentally friendly guy, and I know that these plastic water bottles are bad. Right? They're bad for the environment, but they're really convenient for me. Right? But being an environmentally conscious guy, I went out and I bought myself a big Bubba cooler. Can you see that? Hope I can get it in here. A big Bubba cooler, man. It's metal, it's reusable, and it carries. I only need to drink 2 of these a day, and I've got all the water I need, right? And so I've taken my my little dopamine pill of value to the environment by buying my Bubba cooler here, but I don't use it very often because these things are just so convenient. And I guess I kind of justify it by saying, it's just one bottle. And I've taken my environmentally friendly psychological pill here with my Bubba cooler. And so that's an example of it seems like a small thing, but how much do I value my commitment to be an environmentally conscious person? And obviously not enough if I keep bringing in bottles of plastic water, which they all say, please recycle. You know why they have to say that? Because these things don't biodegrade. Right? The whole world, when they uncover us from the nuclear ash in 10,000 years or whatever, is going to be covered by plastic water bottles, I think, and those little plastic bags that say Dollar General on them. Anyways, I digress. To dumb it down to the mantra of the 1960s, which I lived in and through, if it feels good, do it. When you think that way, it gets you into a lot of trouble because you're empowering the dopamine side of your limbic system, and you're not giving your cortisol, your values, your value hormones, the chance that it needs to win the fight. So I'm not trying to be the fun police here, don't get me wrong, but I do have a simple tool, a mindset change that I call the freedom of a locked room, which is the title of this podcast here today. And here's what it looks like. Instead of thinking, I can't do anything if I'm limited by always having to drink from this Bubba bottle or always having to, follow these overly restrictive rules. A simple mindset change is I can do anything I want inside the lines of my values, the policies or procedures, or my promises. So instead of, damn it, these rules are too limiting, you say, no, I can do anything I want inside these lines. And there's a gazillion examples out there of powerful things being done inside a locked room. I mean, think Nelson Mandela planned a new nation. The Apostle Paul wrote several letters from a Roman prison that formed the basis of much of the New Testament in Christianity. And it kind of reminds me of a Meatloaf song. I'm tempted to sing it, but I won't, because he's one of those guys. You guys know I get a lot of motivation from music. He's one of those guys you just can't imitate, right? But I will tell you the name of the song, and I think many of you have heard it, and I hope many of you will go out there and spend the 12 minutes it's going to take you to listen to it, but it's 12 incredible minutes. It's called I Will Do Anything for Love, but I Won't Do That. I'll do anything for love, but I won't do that. God, it's hard not to sing that. Anybody know what Meatloaf wouldn't do for love? What was it? Bribe a priest? Give a gun to a monkey? I don't know. But I won't make you Google it. It takes him 12 incredible minutes to get there, but he finally tells us what he wouldn't do. He wouldn't stop dreaming. Pretty cool stuff. Anyways, let's look at a real practical example. This came out of an article I saved back in 2008. Can't exactly remember where the article is from, but I kept the article. And the headline of the article was, Pilot Tells Passengers, I'm not qualified to land this plane. Right? So I'm going to read you just a little bit of the article here to tell you what was going on. And I think a lot of you that follow me are from aviation. And so you may have actually heard of this, but you'll certainly be able to relate to it. If you're not from aviation, trust me, I'm going to weave this all in just a minute. So a pilot with more than 30 years of experience was forced to turn his plane around because he was not qualified to land in fog. The airline confirmed Thursday. Passengers on the 8:45 a.m. Flybe flight to Paris were just minutes away from landing at their destination when they were told they'd have to go all the way back to Cardiff, England. One passenger from Bristol missed a job interview in France. Another one missed a wedding. And they explained it was only 20 minutes from landing, and the captain said, unfortunately, I'm not qualified to land the plane in Paris. They're asking for a level 2 qualification. I only have a level 5. We'll have to fly back. So further on down the article, it says a spokeswoman from the airline said she backed the pilot's decision 100%, obviously. He'd recently switched from flying a Bombardier Q300 to a Bombardier Q400. Simple switch, but a little bit different in a few things in the cockpit. And he hadn't completed the requisite low visibility training. And the dense fog cover in the Charles de Gaulle airport hadn't been there when the flight took off. So 3 hours into the flight, he certainly probably had the capability to land in those visibility conditions. But what he didn't have was the official qualification. So the obvious slant of this article, like so many things in the media, was to draw an initial reaction from the readers, right? What kind of pilot with 30 years experience can land in low visibility conditions that other people are landing in, right? And the answer to this question lies in defining the difference between what an individual is capable of doing on the one hand and what they're formally qualified to do on another. So there are many times when our capabilities will exceed our qualifications, and that's where the temptation to violate or deviate sneaks in. And I suspect this was probably the case for this captain. Although frustrating, this was a non-decision for him, right? His decision was made for him by policy. And unfortunately, not a lot of people have the level of maturity or understanding or the personal discipline to see the world through this simple but powerful lens of compliance. Right? Individuals who have this kind of uncompromising personal and professional discipline, they operate with clarity, right? And that's why I call this the freedom of a locked room. Absent an emergency situation, rules make decisions for you, and they also protect you from the second guessing of armchair quarterbacks who operate at ground speed 0, right? Compliance is the link between good policy and safe accomplishment. There's no need to ponder unauthorized options based on what your mental and physical skill set might or might not be on any given day. And an ironic twist on this article, a less professional person might have flown the approach into Paris, made the landing, not been punished, and fallen into that habit, back to our blue threat proverb. First time I felt it was out of necessity, the next time it was out of convenience, right? That's the beginning of something called the normalization of deviance, which we're not going to talk about here, except to say that once you violate and get away with it, you get that second burst of dopamine. Okay? And what that does is it raises the level of dopamine you need to feel the next high. And that's why we say non-compliance, promise breaking, is progressive and it's addictive. You always need more to get that next level of high. Okay, so let's look at a simple equation. When your capabilities exceed the official qualifications, what's required there to make a good decision, right? And that's the case with this captain here. He was clearly able to land there from a skill set standpoint, but he wasn't qualified yet. So when your capabilities exceed your qualifications, you need personal discipline, right? You need to be thinking you are in a locked room. You do not have an option to apply your wonderful skill sets, right? Because you're not allowed to. There are a lot of times when our capabilities exceed our qualifications. This is probably the case with this captain. And although it's very frustrating, the decision was made for him already. And unfortunately, not everybody has that level of maturity. People that do operate with such clarity that it allows their mind to expand to look at what options might be available inside the lines of the policy, the procedure, or the personal promises that you've made to people. So let's look at the other side. Let's look at when, and this is even more cool, when your qualifications are asking more than your capability, right? So how could that be, right? Let's stick with piloting for a second. You're qualified to land in low visibility conditions, but today maybe you're fatigued. Maybe there's something wonky about the airplane. The little brain to stick to rudder to sky link that always works so well for you just doesn't seem to be working today. And so today you might be qualified to land at 100-foot ceiling and a quarter-mile visibility, but today you don't feel like you might be up to it. So what's required to make those kinds of decisions? And that comes down to self-awareness, humility, and judgment, that magical quality, right? So there are times when our qualifications exceed our capabilities. And this is a much more difficult test of our integrity and our professionalism, right? So could have been 100 factors on any given day where somebody out there who can normally do something extremely well feels today is not the day to attempt it. Maybe they're low on proficiency, or maybe like I said, fatigue or some other distraction is really impacting their judgment. Right? So here's the bottom line between this idea of the mix between qualifications and capabilities. Qualification levels are fixed sums, right? They're coldly objective, and they're not affected by peer pressure. They're not affected by pressure to get the job done or the urgency of the moment if it's in our private life, or at least they shouldn't be. Capabilities, on the other hand, are subjective, and they can be altered by different states of personal readiness, physiological or psychological, or, far more often, internal or external pressures to perform. Accurately ascertaining our capability level in real time, that's true connoisseurship, right? And the decision to admit when personal proficiency is the limiting factor is one of the most distinguishing marks of a true professional with great judgment, right? Both at work and a reliable and trustworthy person off duty. So I want to take a little bit longer with our wrap up and takeaways today to kind of link this more to our personal lives, more to our promises, as opposed to just following procedures and rules. So the obvious takeaway number one is that rules and promises need to become locked rooms, not to limit us, but to empower that cortisol side of our fight back against the dopamine, to give us the maximum creativity inside the walls of our promises and rules without sacrificing our trustworthiness or integrity. And there's a few examples to this. I mean, obviously our physical fitness, our diet, applies to all of us, right? We know we should be exercising more, but yet we push that down the road, right? That's the dopamine winning over the cortisol. That's temptation winning over what we know is good for us because we haven't set that value strong enough to give that cortisol stress level enough of a fighting chance against the temptation. And there's far more serious ones. I mean, there are so many broken families from things like alcohol addiction or drug addiction or even the whole infidelity issue. Those are all issues of temptation, where temptations are presented. Right? I'll just have one beer this time. I'll just hang with this group of friends one more time when I know they're likely to be using drugs, or I'll just allow myself to pursue this behavior, knowing that I'll be able to stop somewhere down the line. And that's the dopamine winning. That's the temptation winning. When we make a promise to ourselves, to someone else, or we have a policy or procedure that we're formally required to follow, especially in a highly unregulated environment, which is most of our lives, quite honestly, we have to have the value set strong enough to be able to begin to feel some guilt and remorse when we even contemplate a violation of policy or procedure or promise. Okay? So that's the delicate dance of the dopamine saying, yeah, go ahead, do it. And the cortisol saying, nah, too much risk here. Don't do it. And if you've got this mindset of a locked room where I simply am not going to allow myself to get close to the wall here, there's so many things I can do inside the lines, but I won't do that, in the words of Jim Steinman, aka Meatloaf. Okay? So the second thing, and we've talked about this all the way through, this is not about willpower, right? This is a biochemical battle inside our brains. Right? And when we increase the power of the stress that says, no, I won't do this. This is, I'm not going to have that next cigarette. I'm not going to take that first drink, right? Then we are giving power to the side of us that builds strong walls. When we truly value our commitment to stand inside the lines the walls of the locked room, we give the stress chemicals that signal. And once we give them that signal, we give ourselves a fighting chance. Right? So there's only two takeaways. That's it. Rules and promises need to be locked rooms. And two, it's a biochemical battle. And there are some things that we can do. And those things are strengthening the values and our understanding of why we make promises and why we follow rules in the first place. So this peek into the physiology of temptation is another example of the powerful interplay that neurochemistry and psychology, physiology, and how we think about ourselves is behind all the decisions that we make. Right? It highlights the fact that being only human involves navigating this complex territory, these temptations, right? Especially in situations where strict adherence to rules and promises is paramount to our safety, to our trustworthiness. It's a cornerstone, quite honestly, of our personal ethics. So I know this has been a little bit of an odd journey, like all of these, I hope are. We're going to continue down this path to talk about some of the angles on personal and professional ethics over the next few weeks. I do have another musical metaphor. If any of you want to do a little bit of homework prior to this one, we're going to be looking at the lyrics of the song "Closer to the Heart" by a band called Rush very shortly. If not next week, then definitely the week afterwards. We're here every Tuesday. We drop at 9 o'clock Eastern time. So please share, follow what we're doing. I think we're making a difference out there. The feedback that I'm getting is mostly positive, but I'll take any kind, positive, negative, neutral. We're learning as we go. So until next time, embrace your humanity, the complexities inside it that you bring to both your personal and professional life, and keep the feedback coming because just like you, I'm only human. See you soon.